Welcome, everyone, to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. Jannik Sinner is Australian Open champion, now back-to-back years, as Sinner wins his third career major. He beats Alexander Zverev in this 2025 final. Straight sets. Emphatic. 6-3, 7-6, 6-3. Now a 21-match win streak at the hard court slams for Jannik Sinner, as his dominance becomes the norm on this surface. And the feeling that you get, particularly US Open last year, this year's Australian Open, not that Sinner isn't playing at an exceptional level, but you do feel like there are some extra gears that he just hasn't needed to use. Jannik Sinner's average level wins him slams. That's how good his average level is. And that's why he's going to win many, many more. The ATP Finals run that we just saw him go on was statistically the most dominant ever. The least games lost ever. And he not only is just racking up these titles, but it feels like a lot of the time you're also seeing him do stuff like that, because here in this final against Zverev, he becomes one of just 3 players on the men's side to win a major final without facing a break point. Roger Federer did it against Mark Philippoussis, Wimbledon 2003. Nadal did it against Kevin Anderson, US Open 2017. Shout out Tennis One app. That's where I saw that stat on X. But what I continue to find most impressive about Sinner, above all, is if you follow tennis for any period of time, you recognize that there's such a consistent pattern of success being difficult to deal with, that success is hard to handle. Why? Because it creates more expectation, and expectation creates more nerves, and then the money comes, and the celebrity comes into play, and the goals have to be reset in order to maintain a high level of motivation. It's just never felt like any of that is a factor with Jannik Sinner over the last 2+ years of this meteoric rise, where he just backs it up again and again and again. Sinner has not had one moment where it seems like the success is challenging. And that's not normal. You follow tennis long enough, you see that the success is supposed to be challenging. And here he is defending a major title for the first time, starting 2025, after a 2024 that's going to be almost impossible to live up to. And he does it in Australian Open title-winning fashion. So I'm going to start with Sinner and the things that impressed me about his performance in this final. Then I'll go to Zverev, who realistically, honestly, I think more people are talking about Zverev and the disappointment surrounding his performance after this final than discussing Sinner. But I still want to get to it second, because I just don't feel right about starting with Zverev. I'm going to start Sinner, then I'm going to go to Zverev. I do want to get to the big question here also. Is Zverev going to win a major title in his career? Because every time we see him in one of these matches, in one of these slam finals, and he doesn't get over the line, we get more data, and I think it's worth just revisiting that question now after he falls in his third major final. Before I get into all that, I want to quickly remind you that it's easier than ever to consume Monday Match Analysis in 2025. For the first time, I'll have exclusive short-form content on Instagram, TikTok, and our new YouTube Shorts channel called Gill Gross Shorts. If you're going to follow me on one, make it Instagram, because that's where I'm going to share the most. But if any of those platforms interest you, please do give me a follow. Links are in the description. I just want to start here. I think the biggest difference between these two can be seen on one point in this match, and that is 6-4, second set tiebreak. Sinner with a couple of opportunities to go up 2-0. Obviously, he really wants to grab this one on his own serve and not have to contend with Zverev's delivery. He hits a serve out wide. Zverev blocks the return into the middle of the court. And Sinner rips his +1 forehand onto the sideline, lands outside of the line for a no-chase winner. He had to generate all of his own pace. He had to create width from the middle of the court and find a way through Zverev, who was bracing for the power by retreating far behind the baseline. And he wasn't fully recovered to the middle, but he was almost there. And Sinner made it so good that Zverev couldn't be anywhere near it. This was a phenomenal forehand given the circumstances. And the reason you win 24 out of 27 tiebreaks, which is the streak that Sinner is on now, is because you can hit that forehand when it matters, when the chips are down, in the biggest moment of the match. And all through the match, on a more technical side, we saw that Zverev did not have this level of finishing. That if he had to produce from the middle of the court and generate his own pace, he was not going to get the ball through Sinner. Which is why non-ace winners, and I love this stat, and I wish aces weren't even included in winners, but what I do after a lot of these matches is I'll just hit the subtract button on the aces. What were the winners other than the aces? Zverev hit 13, Sinner hit 26. There is no competition in terms of finishing skill and firepower, and there are many, many levels to that, which we'll get into. Zverev said after the match, he said, quote, "I serve better, but he does everything else better." And first off, and this is another thing we'll discuss in more detail, it's almost alarmingly self-deprecating by the world number 2. But even that is complicated. And I mostly agree with that analysis, don't get me wrong. But if you just look at that, okay, Zverev serves better, that's where he's going to build his advantage in this match. Even that became complicated. So let's delve into that first, because the biggest surprise for me in this match was how much Sinner's first serve outmatched Zverev's return. Sinner's serve damage and his +1 damage was outstanding. And I think that all started with serve accuracy. Now, part of it is, Jannik backs up his serve with +1 forehands like the one that I just described in detail at 6-4 in the seconds at tiebreak brilliantly. But I thought the serve accuracy was unbelievable in this match for Jannik. And so often we get obsessed with the serve percentage. Percent in. We get so married to that number. We associate that number with serve accuracy. But there are multiple ways to miss a first serve. You can miss it out of the service box. You can hit a fault. That's one way to be inaccurate. The other way to be inaccurate is to miss, assuming you're not hitting a body serve, miss towards the middle of the box. And I thought Sinner really avoided that miss. There weren't many first serves where he missed towards Zverev and allowed him a comfortable return. And it made a lot of sense for Jannik to serve that way, because what was the consequence for the other kind of miss? The consequence for the other kind of miss, or a missed first serve, was, well, okay, now Sinner has to hit a second serve. What was happening on these second serves? Zverev was standing 6 feet back. Sinner would hit a body serve, and Zverev would hit a runaround backhand. Whenever the ball came at Zverev, he would actually move around his forehand to hit a backhand. Jannik Sinner is not afraid of a guy hitting a backhand from 6 feet behind the baseline. I know Zverev's backhand is great, but especially when his weight is not moving forward, he's actually kind of falling off to the right because he's getting out of the way of the ball. That's just a rally starter. So what I'm trying to get at is Jannik knew that his second serve was not going to be attacked. Just wasn't. So if the second serve isn't going to be attacked and we're going to get into a neutral rally if I miss my first serve, I might as well go big on my first serve. not necessarily in the speed department, but in terms of accuracy. I'm going to try to really hit my spots. And if I miss the service box sometimes because of that, that's okay. Jannik Sinner's first serve percentage in this match was 60%. That's perfect. Perfect. If he's going to win 84% of his first serve points, which he did. An absolutely dominant number. I just felt, and especially in the second set, there was, it was actually even more extreme because Sinner made 55% of his first serves, but he won 90%, 19 out of 21. I will never in a million years call that a bad serving set. Forget the 55% in. If you are going to win every time you make it and you don't have a matchup issue on the second serve, that is great serving. So I want to make that point. I thought Sinner served beautifully. He also made Zverev play on his service games. He made a lot of returns. It was so important for Sinner to not allow Zverev to use the serve to let him off easy. Sometimes it's going to happen because Zverev's serve is just that good. And of all of the Zverev attributes in this match, I thought the serve was really the only one I would speak highly of. I thought he served well. But you still had Sinner and his returning skill. It is too good to allow Zverev to just serve his way through a match like this. It's never going to happen. Sinner made a great adjustment in the second set because in the first set, Zverev going big on the second serve was he caught Sinner a few times. So and Jannik was again like, I cannot let Zverev beat me with his serve, so I'm just going to go 10 feet back on the second serve return. Jannik was standing very, very deep on both returns. And why not against Zverev? That's the right way to go. This guy is going to serve huge, but he is going to miss towards the middle. He's not going to necessarily just kill you with the sharp angles. And if he is able to open up the court, he's not necessarily going to kill you with a +1 drop shot, or you're really nervous about his ability to approach off of the +1. So if you make the return in play, that in itself is really going to be a great path to finding a way to break his serve a couple of times. So if you're Sinner, why not give yourself more time to see the serve? Why not back way up? He got to a point where he was driving returns, not blocking, not chipping, driving, and making returns. And not a lot of people can say both of those things when they go up against Alexander Zverev. It is so easy to see great returning in a match without noticing great returning in a match. And I think very, similar to, I think, Djokovic and Murray in this way, if you really focus on Jannik Sinner's returning, you end up really appreciating it. If you're only half paying attention, it's easy just to miss it. And there's a reason for that. Bad first serve returning is terminal. Bad first serve returning is noticeable because the points are ending. It's a point loser. When you miss returns, you lose the point. When you hit really short, weak returns, you normally lose the point on the next shot or 2 shots later. Great first serve returning is not the same. It's not a point winner. You don't win a point with a great first serve return. You start a point with a great first serve return. And then a bunch of stuff happens afterwards that's going to determine who ends up winning that point. So it doesn't stick in the brain, but it's so crucial. So let me bring this back full circle to where we started. If Zverev feels like his only advantage, and he said this after the match in his press, his only advantage is that he's a better server. If you look at the entire kind of dynamic, which includes the return, and you compare these two and how it played out in this match, that is not That is not nearly enough of a decisive advantage, given, first of all, how well Jannik, how much success and damage Jannik did with his first serve, and how often Sinner's return was able to neutralize Zverev's supposed only advantage, his big bad first serve. The other thing I saw a ton of that was really important for Sinner was his scrambling. Jannik's defense against Zverev's tame approach shots and squirrely volleying. Sinner's scrambling demands better than that. His end range quality remains, in my opinion, the standout aspect of his game right now. In other words, when he is on the run, but he has a chance to play the ball, the quality of shot that he produces is a massive difference maker. I think right now he is the best on the run player in tennis. And, it's him and Novak Djokovic. And when you talk about similarities in Zverev, it's another thing that he discussed is how similar playing them feels like. I think that is where the similarities begin. But obviously what you need to do against a player who is so excellent at end range is not let them touch the ball. And that's not always going to be possible, but on a short ball or on an easy put away volley, that is often possible. But you have to hit confident, precise approach shots. And you have to finish your volleys with clinicality. And Zverev was not able to do those things, which is why he was 14 of 27 at the net. 52% net points won. Basically a 50-50 proposition when Zverev was forward, which is a really bad number because when you get a short ball, when you get a chance to hit an approach shot, you should win those points. Not all of them, but most of them. It should not be a 50-50 proposition. And look, Jannik, again, he is so good. If you don't hit a great volley, if you don't hit a great approach shot, he is so good at burning you and making you pay. The only other thing, it muddies the net points won stat, is the drop shot. Let me quickly hit on that. Sinner didn't go to it too often. He went the entire first set without hitting a drop shot. At least, I don't remember him hitting one. Whole first set, which was a bit surprising to me because I thought it was going to be a big part of the game plan. Mary Jo Fernandez on ESPN spoke to Darren Cahill, obviously colleagues, and she revealed that Darren mentioned it as part of the game plan. So I was like, okay, let's get ready for this. Didn't see it in the first set. We did see it at 2-3 in the second, just when you started to feel the momentum start to shift. Zverev was playing a bit better. Sinner hit a bit of a lull. He needed something extra. He needed a little change up at this point. Jannik feels those things so well. He hit 2 drop shots in this game, and he needed them in order to hold. He'd be selective with it for the rest of the match. He forced a couple. He hit maybe 1 or 2 bad ones. But it was a good play for Sinner, as I thought it would be. And he did it on match point, which is nice. At the end of the day, though, Zverev could not trade ground strokes with Jannik Sinner. He could not. 9+ rallies. I started talking about the serve and the return because that is where Zverev feels like he has an advantage. And I just wanted to make the point that it's not a very big advantage. But then you can go to the area where Zverev basically submitted that he is inferior. And that's where, at least on this occasion, he was absolutely correct. 9+ rallies, Sinner 29, Zverev 14. Let's move on to the Zverev side of things. He was a shell of his best self. And the only plausible reason, other than the fact that once in a while you have a bad day in the office. We're just kind of past that with Zverev and his big match track record at slams. Hasn't always been finals, so it's more than a 3-match sample size. For a lot of his career, it was just like top 10 players in semis where you'd see kind of performances like this. The only plausible reason why Zverev was, again, a shell of his best self is that this was a major final, and he couldn't handle that. This was a version of Zverev forehand. This was a version of his forehand that will never allow him to beat a great player. He hit 3 winners to 24 unforced errors off of that wing. If you add forcing shots, so forehands where Zverev didn't hit a winner, but he forced an error, you do get to 14 finishes to 24 unforced errors. Still a -10 ratio on the shot that from the back of the court really has to provide you with your finishes. Early on in the first set, I thought that Zverev was definitely reaching for a little bit extra, more pace, sometimes more width on his forehand cross court. And that comes down to the intimidation factor of Jannik Sinner. Just knowing that you are hitting a cross-court forehand into a nuclear weapon of a forehand on the other side of the court. And I'm sure Zverev and his father, they went over this before the match, or they just know this because they've played Jannik enough. It's going to be important that the forehand cross has quality. And you could see that in Zverev's head. He was not passive on it, but he was not making it. There were a ton of forehand errors early. I thought they were mainly, not necessarily attacking errors, but a lot of aggressive trade errors. And then, as the misses piled up, it just started looking tighter and tighter and tighter. And this is straight from my notes after the first set. Quote, "If you were hoping for an improved big match Zverev forehand, that was a really disappointing first set. Damage and consistency." In the second set, it was a little better. Better racket head speed. I think he was mostly hitting it flatter. And then the tiebreak happened, where he goes up a mini break, has a good start to the tiebreak, goes up a mini break, immediately forehand unforced errors on back-to-back points. And the first one was kind of a good miss. He actually hit the ball pretty solid and missed it. Like, the contact was good and clean, and he missed it maybe 2 ball lengths beyond the baseline. Forehand inside in. As far as misses go, there were a lot of ugly ones in this match. That was not one of them. Then the next point, shank forehand, drops in. Next forehand, or I think either 2 shots later, another shank forehand, this one's out. And those looked bad. It looked like the fact that he missed the forehand on the previous point was just weighing on his mind as he whipped his racket through the air. I don't think it was just on the forehand, though. I thought, as I mentioned, Zverev's serve picked up a lot of slack. The first set, it was only 6-3. I think it could have gotten way worse, way faster if Zverev didn't serve so well, particularly in the clutch situations, fending off break points with excellent serving. So the serve picked up a lot of slack, but the backhand didn't. The volleys were as bad as the forehand, which we've already sort of mentioned. Ultimately, I felt the same way about both of Zverev's ground strokes, which is that I wouldn't give it a high grade in damage or consistency. And so often we talk about the trade-off between the two. What is your appetite for risk if you're Alexander Zverev? Normally, it's a pretty low appetite for risk, but it's really, really high consistency. Well, it might have to be better against Jannik Sinner or different against Jannik Sinner. The consistency might not get him across the finish line. So one thing that I was looking out for at the start of the match was, are we going to see increased damage, increased quality, maybe, but lower consistency. And ultimately, with the way the ball striking was for Zverev in this match, I think there were way more misses than usual. And the trade-off of he's hitting it bigger or tighter to the lines or with more like offensive conviction, no, that wasn't there either. It was neither. It was neither. The other critique for Zverev, you would expect him to play with more fire in the third set because I know that he backs himself physically. I know that he knows that Sinner cramped in the third set of his semifinal, had some issues physically with illness in his fourth round match against Rune. Sascha was feeling good about his game, was feeling very, very fresh, didn't spend a long time on the court en route to the final. So, look, I thought that Zverev was going to have an advantage if the gas tanks came into play. But instead of playing the third set like he was still in the match, he looked completely and utterly dejected. And I can't help but wonder if it was the net cord in the second set tiebreak. Did that completely take it out of him? Did that break his will? The net cord and the +1 forehand that Sinner married to the edge of the sideline on that 6-4 point. Another thing where Zverev could have kind of thought, oh, woe is me, that should have missed, right? I don't know, because with Zverev, we've been offered a window into his head at times, and it hasn't always been pretty. We saw last year, in an argument with the chair umpire, he blamed his first two losses in Slam finals on umpiring. He claimed he almost won Roland Garros before he hurt his ankle, when in reality, he had 6 more sets to win in order to win Roland Garros. 6 more sets. So he has this thing in his head, I think, when something doesn't go his way, of I'm the most unlucky person in the world and the stars aren't aligned and it's not meant to be. And he kind of played the third set as if he was kind of at his own, throwing a funeral for himself, which I just thought was really disappointing because I don't think the match was over if Zverev started playing better. I really don't think the match was over. And I think if he just got to a place where he's like, I don't know, if I win this third set, maybe Jannik is weakened for the rest of the match and I have a chance to win this thing. I think that's how he should have been thinking. I don't think that's how he was thinking. Let's get to will Zverev ever win a slam, and then I'll end with some Sinner stuff because I always like to end it on the winner. So first, let me start by looking at this very historically and a data-driven look at this question. History is, in most ways, on Zverev's side here. Normally, if you are good enough to lose 3 major finals, you are too good not to win one. That's how the history has played out. Ivan Lendl, Andre Agassi, Andy Murray, Goran Ivanisevic, Dominic Thiem, and Casper Ruud, TBD on him. But if you look at that list of players, who are all of the men's players who have been 0-3 or worse in Slam finals, they have all gone on to win at least one. Some of them have won a whole lot. Now, if you complicate this, you throw a little bit of nuance into this, you bring the age factor in. Lendl was 0-4 at 23 years old. He ended up winning 8. Agassi was 0-3 at 21 years old. he also ended up winning 8. You start to see the older you are when you hit that 0-3 mark, the less you end up winning. So let's go to Andy Murray. He was 0-4 at 25 years old. He ends up winning 3. He's always a weird case because we know he's kind of a better player than what the slam total ended up saying. Goran was 0-3 at 26. He wins 1. Thiem was 0-3 at 26. He wins 1. Zverev is now 0-3 at 27. So the one reason why I would complicate any comparison to Agassi and Lendl, or they were young by the time they were 0-3 in major finals. I would complicate some of these comparisons is that Zverev is a whole lot older. Now, he's not that much older than Goran and Thiem, but we've seen, like, it could have gone either way for Dominic Thiem and even Ivanisevic. They only had the stars aligned for them once. And most of them did not have this particular performance problem that we're seeing with Zverev. If I take the data-driven approach and I sort of end that and we go to what I'm seeing, how I'm reading the tea leaves, I think there's a big problem here. And in terms of trauma and scar tissue, I feel that this loss was just as traumatic as the first two. The first two were very different from this because Zverev had big leads. He won 2 sets against Thiem in the 2020 U.S. Open and against Alcaraz in last year's Roland Garros. This one was traumatic in a different way where he was never in it and he got blown out. And he did not produce a break point. But at the end of the day, he leaves yet another final. And the feeling is I couldn't get myself up to where I need to get up in terms of individual performance. I couldn't get there again. So to me, I know it's a very different match, but the scar tissue goes even deeper. So that's another aspect where these comparisons with Lendl and Agassi and Murray aren't very germane because the way that they lost those finals were just not this traumatic. When Andy Murray lost the Wimbledon final to Roger Federer, his 4th, he cried into the mic and said, "I'm getting closer." Zverev can't say he's getting closer. My 2 cents are that 2 things need to happen for Alexander Zverev. Something needs to break his way, and he needs to fulfill his performance capabilities in one of these big finals. And both of those things need to happen probably at the same tournament. The first part is out of his control. Forget that. The second part is going to require real work. It does not just happen. Madison Keys, who won this Australian Open, her first major at 29 years old, she went to therapy. She changed her entire mental reality, not just as a player, as a person. She decided that she didn't need to win a major title to be satisfied with herself, to love herself, to be proud of her career. She made that detachment. She said she got to a point where she felt like Madison Keys is more than whether or not she wins a major. And with that comfort and that inner stability, that foundation for her mental health, she was able to relax a little bit. And when she could relax, she unlocked her ability to perform at her best in these big matches. Now, this is not a copy-paste. Okay, the mind is complicated. Everybody has different personalities, different backgrounds, and there's no one size fits all in terms of fixes here. So what Matty Keys did might not work for Zverev, but the point is, the quest for mental improvement is active. It's not passive. And that's why it was so alarming to hear the way Alex was speaking after this loss to Sinner, to say after the match, quote, "I'm just not good enough." That is BS. He is number 2 in the world. He has beaten all of these top players. He's won Masters 1000s. He's won the year-end championships. He's won an Olympic gold medal. He is freaking good enough. What's not good enough is his performance. It's not his ability. It's not his capability. It is his performances when it's time to do the job. And I felt he spent way too much time after this match either coping or rationalizing by analyzing all the ways where Jannik Sinner is a better tennis player than he is, instead of reflecting on his own performance mentally and making a commitment to trying to fix that. That's what I'm not seeing. And if that doesn't happen, I don't think Zverev is ever going to win a major title. One more thing on Sinner that I've just found so fascinating. I still think, well, let me start here. He has reached a Djokovician level of completeness, absence of defect. It's really hard to say, these are good tactics against Jannik Sinner, or these are the kinds of players who give Jannik Sinner a lot of problems or give him a lot of trouble. And that's because inherently what we're talking about when we discuss a good matchup or a bad matchup is how do strengths align with weaknesses. And with Jannik, it's so difficult to say, well, these are the weaknesses. How are we creating patterns or tactics or play styles that actually create matchup issues for Sinner? You can't. But I still have a theory that I feel pretty strongly about, that his weakest attribute is endurance and durability. But I will also continue to emphasize that this theory of mine goes untested if nobody is good enough to survive the first 3 hours against Jannik Sinner at a major. And of these 3 hardcourt title runs that Sinner has embarked on from last year's Australian Open, only one player has pushed Jannik Sinner 5 sets, and it was Medvedev in that final. Nobody has pushed him past 4 hours. I saw a tweet from Vanch. Sinner's never won a match in his career past 4 hours. He's still 2-8 against top 20 players and 5-setters. He's still lost 5 of his last 6 5-setters. It just doesn't matter because he is that dominant that not only has nobody been able to beat him at one of these hardcourt majors, but nobody has been able to push him at one of these hardcourt majors for the most part. Coverage this week will continue with a Steve Flink interview and a mailbag as always, so look out for that YouTube community tab post. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.